Today's forum is entitled Getting Around to What's Important. In our hectic lives, we often find ourselves unable to find time for the things that are important to us, such as spending time with family and friends, being close to nature, and getting enough exercise. In this presentation, Susan Cabrera will address these topics and include several readings from her poetry book, Life in the Fast Lane. Following the lecture, this book will be available for purchase, and Susan will sign if you like. So please welcome Susan Cabrera.
Hello, everyone. So good to be here at the Humanist again. It's always a pleasure to see you and to interact with you. So I did want to mention a little bit about my background for those of you who don't know. I have my master's in counseling psychology from Stanford, and I also have my bachelor's from Stanford in English literature. So I have a crossover of the literature background and the writing background and also the psychology background. For my psychology background, it was 100% behavior modification. So we learned a little bit about rational emotive, Jungian, and others. I think my professor spent a whole day on about 7 different therapies, but they were so sold on behavior modification. And actually, I myself am very sold on it. It's a wonderful way to look at yourself and to be able to make change without having to spend years and years and years on the therapist's chair, not to mention the money that it takes to go through that. But here, those of us who live in Silicon Valley, it's a little bit different than other places in the world, isn't it? It is, definitely. It's a little more fast-paced. It's a little more creative. It's a little more entertaining. Think of the things that we have around us that we can go to. On the coast, the universities, so many wonderful things that we have. And because of these wonderful opportunities, and because all of us in this room are so intelligent and so wanting to do so many wonderful things, we find ourselves in a very, very hectic lifestyle. And add to that, if you have a job or two, or if you have children, or obligations with parents, it almost seems overwhelming, doesn't it? It's very, very hectic at times. So it's no surprise that I have this topic today of getting around to what's important. How in the heck do we have time to get around to what's important? It almost seems impossible to us. So we do very constructive things, like we make lists. Does anyone here make lists? Yeah, lots of lists. Some of us have daily lists. I personally have a daily list. We always have calendars that we have to look at. We're juggling so many things that we have to do this. I mean, even if we're intelligent and we can remember most things, there's always 1 or 2 things that are going to slip through the cracks that really are important, that we should really pay attention to. But if you're like me, in spite of the fact that you have this wonderful list and that you really have it together in your brain, how many of you actually get to all the things on your list every day? Raise your hands. Oh, there's one person. No, he was teasing me. So, despite our best efforts, we have just pretty much come to accept we're not going to always get around to what's important. So to address how to get around to this, I want to talk about 4 things today. First of all, identifying what is important to us. Secondly, talking about examples of physical and material things that are important. Third, examples of relationships that are important. And fourth, talk about the foundation blocks of getting around to what's important. And at the end, I have a very special wish for you. So starting out with identifying what's important, each of you should find a blank half sheet on your seats. I'd like you to get that out. And does everyone have a half blank sheet? Okay, great. And probably some of you don't have something to write with, but I'd just like you to think for a moment of 3 to 5 things, 3 to 5 things that are important to you that you just haven't been able to get around to for one reason or another. These might be things that keep moving from your to-do list from week to week. Or there might be something that you haven't written down. But there are things that you want to do that you feel are important, but you just haven't gotten around to them. Just take a second to do that. These won't be shared, by the way, so you don't have to worry about talking about them or sharing them. It's just for you. Got some pens being passed around there. Thank you. I know some of you, these are right off the top of your head, and others of you are having to think a little bit about it, aren't you? Okay, so what are you stating on those sheets that is important? Okay, do you really think they're important, or are you just saying they're important? And the second part of that question is, if you really think they're important, why haven't you done something about it? Why haven't you dealt with it? Why haven't you resolved it? So there's often that disparity, isn't there, with what we say we really need to do or want to do or should do, and what we actually end up doing. Usually, if something is really important, we will somehow find the time to get around to doing something about it. So I want to talk about a few things. One are common reasons that people on the outside can see why we aren't doing things. And then I want to talk about reasons inside of our minds, inside of our consciousnesses, for why we don't do things. So looking at the outer reasons, one reason is something we've already talked about. I don't have enough time. How many of us are either ourselves chickens running around with their heads chopped off, or we have a friend who's always running around with their, like a chicken with their head chopped off? Just, it's a constant movement. It's a constant franticness. We just don't have enough time. And if someone like that says, I just haven't had enough time to such and such, well, we understand why, because they live such a hectic life. Another reason that you can see on the outside for why we don't do things is because life happens. You don't know from one day to the next what is going to happen. You might have the best plan for why you're going to finally resolve that important issue in your life, but then your mother falls and gets a concussion. You have to take time off from your job, you have to help. Or your son breaks his leg on the football field, and all of a sudden the great plan you had, the great time that you had set aside to deal with this is gone. And that's part of the unpredictability of life. You have to go with the flow. So these are outer things that affect why we can't get things done. But some of the inner reasons are extremely important too. One of them is, if you're living a hectic life, chances are you're pretty tired, aren't you? At the end of the day, you just don't really feel like revving up to having to handle something that's important or that might take your energy. Or someone might just admit, you know what? I'm lazy. I just don't feel like it. It's not that I'm tired. It's not that I'm worn out. I'm just lazy. I want to sit and drink a beer and watch TV and just hang out with myself. Or another reason, another inner reason, might be that you're irresponsible. It's not just that you're lazy, but you don't want to have to deal with things. How many of you have known a teenager who lived in your house, you're a parent, and they just don't seem to pick up after themselves? And after a while, in their room, dirty clothes starts piling up. It starts little, and then you kind of have to walk around it, and then you have to walk over it, and then it gets really smelly. And the parents are nagging, hey, you need to deal with that. You're old enough now. Take it down the laundry room, do your laundry. And sometimes, guess what? Teenager doesn't do anything about it. So what's going on in the teenager's brain? Well, a million things, right? But that teenager knows that there's a good chance that if he or she doesn't do anything about that and that pile keeps getting smellier and bigger, what's going to happen? Mom, that's right. Mom will do it. Mom will do it because she can't stand it any longer. It's the lesser of two evils for her to go in and have to clean it up. She doesn't want her friends coming over and saying, What's that smell? What's that horrible smell in this house? Febreze will only go so far. So this is an example of our sometimes not wanting to do something because we're irresponsible. We figure, number one, if I wait long enough, someone else will do it for me. Or if I wait long enough, the problem will disappear magically. So another inner response could be that we're physically or mentally not up to doing something. Let's say you have a house project that's really important and it really needs to be done, but you've injured your back. And so physically, even though you want to and you set aside time for it, you can't do it. You just physically can't do it. Or let's say you've undergone a lot of emotional stress. You've gone through a divorce, or you've had a death in the family, and you're feeling like you really can't take on more mental, you don't have the mental capacity to take on something that needs to be done. That's another reason. Another reason is that you're afraid. Is there anything on your list that you know should be done, but there's some fear inside of you? Maybe it's a fear that you're not going to be successful in accomplishing it. Maybe it's a fear that you're afraid that you won't have the knowledge to do it, or that someone might look at you and say, she's not doing it right, or he's not doing it right. Or you're afraid of the topic itself. Let's say you feel that you should make a will. But in making the will, preparing for it, you'll have to be thinking about your own death, won't you? So that's something you just really rather not think about right now. And then a final inner reason is that what you have on your list there that you say is important, it's really not important to you. You've been saying for a long time it's important, but you know what? It's not. So let's say that Carl comes out of CVS and he goes to the parking lot and he sees that someone has bashed into his car and there's a huge dent in the front, a huge ugly dent. It's bent the metal in toward the wheel. And he's thinking, oh my gosh, am I even going to be able to drive this thing? So it turns out he is able to drive the car. And his friends are saying, oh, Carl, you got to get that car fixed. It looks terrible. He says, well, it runs fine. And so he says to his friends, yeah, this is really important. I'm going to have to go and get this fixed. But you know what? It's not really important. He could live with that. It's not that big of a deal. But social convention tells him, you know, for the good of the community to not look at your eyesore, you should be doing something about this. So it's really important to, when we're talking about what is important, that the things we decide upon are truly what is important and not marginal things. So I want to move on to giving you some examples of these things that we can't get to. And I'll start out with reading one of my poems. It's called Closet Cleaning Phobia. Do you have that nasty closet that just stares at you and says, bet you never will come near me because I'm such an ugly mess? Lurking deep in its dominion, who could fathom what's beneath? Maybe old stuff, maybe new stuff, worn out sweatshirt, plastic wreath. An aversion do we harbor to clean out this closet full. It's as if we have a phobia and away from it we pull. But today's the day I've promised. I will open up that door and attempt to clean that closet from the ceiling to the floor. Okay. Now I will get started. If I'm lucky, phone will ring, and I'll have a few more minutes to avoid this gruesome thing. Well, the phone is not complying, but a thirst is coming on. I should go and get some water. I'll be back before too long. Looking through my kitchen window, sun is calling me to play. Maybe I should save the closet for a gloomy, rainy day. So the closet with its mysteries, ever safe from human purge, lingers high on my to-do list, if I ever get the urge. So, thank you. So our closet cleaning phobia applies to many things. We have so many ways that we can avoid the things that we need to do. So I'm going to give you some examples now. The first one is Karen. Now, Karen has a wonderful 3-week vacation, and she's so excited. She's thinking, I'm going to get a lot done during these 3 weeks. So, someone's shaking their head, no. So, she decides for the first 2 weeks she wants to have fun, like Olivia. She wants to get out there. She wants to play. So she scheduled a trip away from home for the first 2 weeks to give herself some personal satisfaction. And then the 3rd week she'll have the personal satisfaction of doing home projects and taking care of things that are important at home, which she never would have time and never would have energy to get around to if it weren't for this vacation time. So she goes and has a wonderful time the first 2 weeks. And then she comes home and she looks at her list. She has a list of 9 things that she's promised herself that she's going to get done during this last week. Does she have the time to do it? Well, literally, she does have the time to do it. But does she do it? No. Right. Everybody knows it's not going to get done. In Karen's case, she's an extremely organized person. And guess what? She gets 6 out of 9 things done, which is pretty good. But even though we set aside the time to do these things, we can't always get to them for one reason or for another. Another example is Mark. Mark is in his early 20s. Real sharp guy. He's going to community college. But he realizes he is so unorganized he can barely function. He's able to get to classes. He's a real nice guy. Everybody likes him a lot. But he knows he's unorganized. So he notices that there's an actual course calling How to Get Organized. And he decides to take it. Now, keep in mind that this young fellow, he's sincere. He really realizes he needs to change his life and get more organized. So he takes the class, and the professor says, "Okay, class, I want you to write down a list of 10 things that you want to do over the next 12 months. Over the next year, you identify 10 things that you want to do, and then you will attempt to do them this year." Well, the class was very good. He was very attentive. He was really wanting to make a change. So, he had his 10 things. He starts doing them, and guess what? In 3 months, they're all done. Every single one of his 10 things that he gave himself a year to do, they were done. And he exclaimed, "I can't believe how easy it is to get things done. All you have to do is write them down. And then you do them. And then you check them off your list. And it's fun." So for him, his list was a matter of a new thought, a new way of being organized. And for him, it was really quite easy. And then the third one is Barbara. Barbara owns her own business. She rents an office, and very well put together woman, beautifully dressed, beautiful jewelry, the whole thing. Gets along very well with her clients. And I would say, someone that you'd be attracted to as a professional that could help you out. Well, at one point, Barbara got really interested in social media. And I noticed when I would go to visit her periodically at her office that her desk, which was a normal desk with normal clutter on it, was starting to get more and more clutter on it. And I noticed that she was spending more and more time on social media and talking to me about how interesting it was, and all this huge thing that should be part of her life was becoming a huge tangent of energy. The last time I saw Barbara, I was actually worried about her. Her desk was covered with about a foot of paper clutter. And this is a professional person who needs to be dealing with clients and needs to be getting things done. And yet, for some of us, social media can become an addiction, can't it? You're thinking about it all the time. You're wondering about it. You're wanting to respond. You're wanting to maintain an image. Whatever it is that you're wanting to do, it starts consuming you. And it starts taking over your life. I haven't seen Barbara for a few years, but I do hope that she was able to snap out of that debilitating condition that she was creating. So now I want to move on to relationships, and I'm going to start with another poem entitled More Time with His Mercedes. I met a therapist one day who sat and shared with me. I counsel people of great wealth. Their hardships do I see. The person that impressed me most had nothing left to gain. Upon his deathbed he did lie in misery and pain. My goal it was to comfort him as he approached his end. He'd been a faithful client of mine and had become a friend. He said to me with great regret, I wish I hadn't spent my precious time on worldly things that cost a pretty cent. It's not the money or the fame, two things I've grown to hate, that constitute what life's about, and now it's just too late. I cannot reconstruct the past. Oh, how I wish I could. I need my relatives and friends. They do me so much good. I'd make them my priority. I'd tell them how I felt. I'd let myself be vulnerable. Allow my heart to melt. Mercedes, stocks, and large estate mean nothing to me now. They can't bestow the love I need. To riches I have bowed. Relationships are paramount. Important things are not. Please live your life for those you love. True love cannot be bought. And as I sat as therapist and eased his lonely heart, without a friend or relative, this man would soon depart. I never will forget that day. So much from him I learned. To live today, the type of life for which I've always yearned. This story told, the therapist and I in silence sat. No words between us could be said more meaningful than that. You know, my brother has a great plaque in his house that reads a certain way. I'd like you to help me finish this adage. The best things in life are free. As we've all heard that adage, right? It's anybody not heard it? Oh, okay. The best things in life are free. And you know that's true, isn't it? No, it's not true. I love it. So my brother's plaque says, the best things in life are not things. Yeah. The best things in life are not things. They're relationships. They're feelings. They're things that we can truly count on that come from the heart, right? So I want to give you an example of Tom, Carol. Tom and Carol are a married couple with 2 kids. They live in Silicon Valley, and they're really a lovely couple. They both come from upper class families, and they're both professionals with very, very, very high paying jobs. So they thought, well, we need to find a place to live, and they found a lovely home in a well-to-do area, and started raising their boy and their girl there. And I didn't see them for many years, and then I ran into Tom. I said, hey, how's it going? I'd been to a party at their house early on when they moved in. Lovely, lovely home. He said, Susan, we're really struggling. I said, really? He said, yes. We barely have enough money to make it. I said, really? I was in shock. I mean, believe me, these were people in very high-paying jobs. How could this be? He said, between our mortgage payments and the types of cars that we've had to buy and the types of activities that our kids need to be involved in, horseback riding, polo lessons, you know, the higher echelon types of things that are almost an obligation, aren't they? You know, if everybody else is doing it and your kids can't, quote unquote, afford to be in it, it's like they're maybe looked down upon a little bit. And it's a lot of pressure on the parents. It's something that's not, quote unquote, real, right? I mean, if you didn't take a horseback riding lessons, you're not going to die. But you feel like you're going to die if you're that kid and you can't fit in, or you're that parent and you feel you can't provide your kid with the equipment or with the outfits and so on to fit in. So Tom said they had gotten themselves into this place where they were just really not just struggling but suffering. And I really felt for him. Such a good person, so much to give and so much that he was getting, but still it wasn't enough. Because what they had defined as important was taking them down. It was going to be the end of them. And I don't know what happened since then. That was about 6 years ago. I hope they were able to come up from that nosedive. But we have to be careful when we get in these situations to constantly be looking at what's important to me. Chances are, if Tom and Carol had analyzed what was important a little bit earlier, they might have been able to avoid this horrible mess that they were in. And someone would say, we should all have such problems, right? I know a landlord who owns many, many things. He says, oh, Susan, I'm so stressed. It's so hard. I mean, he's a gazillionaire. We should all have such problems, but these are problems that we actually create ourselves. So I want to read you another poem, and this one is called When Then. And the emphasis in this is what we're talking about here, finding time for what's important. So, when I select the right exercise plan, then will my body do all that it can. When I can choose the best diet for me, then will I lose weight. You just wait and see. When I can find time to play with my boy, then will he know me beyond the bought toy. When I can spend time with husband or wife, then we'll rekindle the love of our life. When I can take an adventurous trip, then will I drink from the cup of excitement. When I have saved up enough to be set, then will I find out what money can get. When I retire, before I grow old, then will my leisure time start to unfold. When I'm a senior, I'll work on some art. Then I'll be able to nurture my heart. When I can know all that I need to know, then will I venture out fearless of foe. When I am certain I won't shed a tear, then will I go through life empty of fear. When I can get truth from those who have lied, then I will give myself what's been denied. When I meet just the right person for me, then will my days be unfettered and free. Till then, I'll just have to muddle along, hoping my weariness won't end my song.
The moon belongs to everyone.
The time to do it is now. I'd like to talk about the foundation blocks to getting around to what's important. And there are 4 of them that I'll share with you. Number 1, truly assess what's important to you. We've talked a little bit about how we sometimes say things are important and they're not really important. So try to determine that things are really important if you have them on your list. Secondly, respond with maturity and responsibility. And we talked about the teenager. He's immature, irresponsible, and sometimes you can always expect that from someone whose brain isn't fully formed yet. But what about if we're in our 70s and 80s? Do you think someone in their 70s and 80s can be immature or irresponsible? When we talk about being older and wiser, older, yes. More knowledge, yes. More experience, yes. Wiser, probably. Wiser. More mature and responsible? Not necessarily. So, just because we're older doesn't allow us to sit on our laurels. we still have responsibilities. We still have the ability to handle things in a mature way and to be in relationships in a responsible and mature way. The third thing is to physically and mentally declutter our lives. So, remember Barbara's desk getting taller and taller with papers? Needs to be decluttered. I would venture everybody in this room has a closet that needs to be cleaned, if not a garage, if not a drawer, if not all of the above, if not a car or a car trunk. There's always something that needs to be decluttered materially in our lives. But there are things physically and mentally that need to be decluttered. So mentally, what needs to be decluttered? Are you going around all the time feeling preoccupied about things? There's just so many words and thoughts racing through your mind that you have a hard time thinking clearly. And you know, something I've been thinking a lot lately is as we get older, part of the reason it's harder to think clear is we have more things to think about, don't we? Unless we're totally taken care of, like a king or a queen, and we have servants around us to take care of us, life can have its burdens, right? And we have our physical problems as well. And, these things are mentally draining on us. And then we may experience different stages of dementia. And that just happens to some of us, something physiological that can happen to the smartest person. So I look at decluttering, physical things and mental things. I look at decluttering as equal to de-stressing. If you are decluttering your life, at the same time you are de-stressing your life. Can anyone identify with that? Right. So you clear the path by decluttering. You clear the path by de-stressing. And once you've decluttered and de-stressed, what do you have left? You have room for getting around to what's important. You've already defined what's really important, and now you've created a space to do that, mentally and physically. I know there was one gentleman I knew years ago who used to give talks on stress. And one of his metaphors, which I just love, is a garden hose. And he said, life has its bumps in the night, but some of us have knots in our garden hoses. The knot's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be a hose that's free-flowing. It's supposed to bring nourishment. It has a beginning and an end. But if you have a knot in it, what happens? It creates tremendous tension. That knot is not supposed to be there. It could even burst over time. And so his feeling was that our responsibility in life was to look at the hose of our life and start undoing these knots so that life could flow, so that you could think more clearly, so that you could have more energy, the type of energy that you were meant to have. And the fourth and last thing I want to talk about is knowing that not getting around to something that's important. You've identified it's important, and you consistently not getting around to it. That creates a big drain in your life. It's probably subconscious drain in your life. You're not doing something that you're supposed to do. You're not dealing with something you're supposed to do. You're not handling something that you're supposed to do. And consciously or subconsciously, it's like a low-grade infection. You might not even know that it's there, but it's affecting your ability to be fully you, to be fully vibrant, and to be fully capable of doing what life needs of you and what you would like to do in life. So be careful to not burden yourself with these things and not be carrying these heavy things around that don't really, really need to be there. So I want to end with my little thought for you, and that is, our topic today is getting around to what's important. Absolutely, I'd like you to get around to what's important. But even more than that, I would like you to find satisfaction in taking care of what's important. Taking care of what's important is so satisfying, isn't it? I know all of you have had something in your lives that has been unpleasant that you haven't wanted to deal with. And when you finally took the time to do it, you were greatly relieved that it was done. You were greatly satisfied that this important thing got the attention it deserved. So that's what I wish for all of you, that you can live in that zone of doing the things that are important and having the satisfaction of knowing in yourself that you're doing the right thing for yourself. So thank you very much.
Okay, remember, I will walk the microphone around, hold it like this, close to your mouth, because we're recording, and if you are talking and you don't have the mic in your hand, you're not doing the right thing. Okay, so I will go around to people who put their hands up in the order in which I see them go up. In the beginning, a whole bunch go up. So I'll have to just work through them. Anybody
Okay,
want to ask questions?
in the meantime, I'm going to pass around this basket. I'm going to have a drawing at the end for a free book. So if you're interested, just fill out a little slip, and I'll have the drawing later. So any questions or comments?
Do you have a card or something? Oh, do you want a piece of paper or something? I'll write it down.
Yes.
Sorry.
I happen to have found a solution for that teenage problem in my own life. I had 2 children. The girl is the elder. The boy is 2 years younger. Neither one are picked up after themselves. And my solution was that I hired the girl for a salary, a monthly salary, to be my housekeeper. And boy, did that make a difference. Daddy, pick that up. Mommy, pick that up. Brian, pick that. The house had never looked so good.
Very creative. Very good.
Anybody
So
else?
just to follow up on that, tell us what was aside from your house being cleaner, what was the reaction of her victims?
Well, her victims were actually very cooperative because we appreciated somebody keeping us on track. Besides, she also did the cooking, and I was pleased that my daughter had learned to be a good cook.
Wow. Very nice. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Okay, has anyone ever gotten a wooden round to it? Or seen them? Everyone should have one. Anybody have any questions?
Hi, thanks for your talk. I didn't quite, I guess I wasn't perceptive enough to really get to the core of how do we decide. And I was thinking, as you were talking about, for example, Barbara, okay, and my perception is that you were imposing a set of standards and values to judge her as to she was not up to whatever standard you thought, and she should be acting this way. What about values? Maybe that's her value. That's the life she wants.
Good question. So I knew Barbara for about 6 years, and she was, like I said, a very valued consultant. And the last couple of years that I knew her, she was telling me that she was feeling out of control. And she was telling me that she was having a hard time pulling it all together. I personally believe in cluttered desks. I like to call my desk an organized mess, where I know things are. But I think that it's not so much the physicalness, but her telling me that she was not able to hold it together very well, and that she was finding herself pulled away on that tangent I was talking about, of being involved in something that was more interesting or more distracting to her. So she herself was saying that it was becoming a problem, and I think that the level of clutter on the desk was indicative of her not being able to hold that together. But I think, as you say, there are different values. So, like for me, a cluttered desk is a sign of intelligence and creativity. But to someone else, it would be a sign of someone who's not organized and not doing very well. So the outer things aren't always reflective of what's going on inside. Had she not shared that with me, I would have assumed that she was able to keep up what she was doing, despite the fact that her desk was unwieldy. I think there's a follow-up there. Did you have a follow-up on that?
I'm curious later on, because initially she was unhappy. Is that fair to say?
I don't think
Distressed?
Initially, when I first met her?
Yeah.
No, I knew her for 6 years. She was not unhappy at all.
Okay, but when she started to get into the situation, she was distressed and less happy. I guess my question is, after maybe she decided what she had been doing before was distressing her and making her unhappy. Did you find that she was less stressed and happier now?
So you're thinking maybe that her job was really the source of the stress. Yeah, exactly. So, well, I'm just using her first name so I can tell you this. That what she was mainly involved in was trying to find a mate. And she was exploring several different relationships, and it was becoming very consuming. So that was her main distraction on that, and it was pulling her emotional energy and her time energy away from her particular job. So we have another question.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if this is exactly a question or a comment, sort of in between. You mentioned that we need to figure out what's most important to us. And I think it's hard sometimes to figure out whether in Barbara's case, for example, maybe Barbara could have taken a step back and thought, well, you know, I guess even though my life is going out of control and I don't like that, my priority is still, in Barbara's case, to find a mate. And so that's more important to focus on that than to focus on clearing up my desk of clutter. And I think there's a million situations like that where, and then you step back and you think, okay, but the clutter's still driving me nuts. So am I actually just rationalizing? In other words, choosing which your priority is a very tough thing sometimes. And maybe things that you think are not important. I don't know. I think I kind of said what I wanted to say. Whatever that was.
I think I got it, actually. So that's a really good example, because here's Barbara. She's got her obligation of her work. And then she discovers that she can maybe find a mate somehow this way. And that's really important to her, too. So her work's important. Finding a mate's important. So what becomes the most important? You don't know. And so let's say the mate becomes most important. So here's where we go back to the maturity and responsibility part. So let's say the mate is most important. She'd still have to tie up the loose ends to figure out how to meet her work responsibilities to the best that she can. So if she chose to just let the desk pile up and more and to not handle her clients who are paying her to do work for them, and just allow it to be okay for that to slide so that she can focus on dating, that's probably not going to work too well. It's probably going to create a situation for her where she's going to have to be even more burdened than what she is. Sometimes if we don't clean up messes along the way, they just get worse and worse and worse. And it's, like your dishes piling up in the sink. The fairy godmother is probably not going to come along and wave the magic wand. If we have responsibilities that are valid, like a client, it really needs to be dealt with. It could be she'd want to segue out of that by having less clients, or it could be she'd want to not have that type of work at all. That's a whole different issue. But the one issue she knows is that she does have something important, a client that is paying her to do a particular job. So we're not stuck in these things that are important. We can go with the flow. What's important last month might not be important this month. And that's part of being a human being, is having the intelligence to work that out. And something else I want to mention too is friends and relatives. I'm hoping that everybody in this room has someone that they can confide in or talk to, bounce things off of, because frankly sometimes life gets pretty confusing and pretty hard. And we need to talk with someone else. We may not like their advice. We may not think it's good advice, but it's stimulating. And if we can trust them to keep the confidence, then it's a very, very good thing to do. Okay, another comment?
Yes. One of the things I'd like to point out, though, about being ambiguous, there are two things. First of all, just an excellent presentation. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And but one of the things about being ambiguous about things is it leaves you more choices. And so if you can just float around and say, well, I might do this, I might do that, and never ever decide. But you always have this vast ocean of choices still open to you because you haven't made a decision. So I think that's like one of the barriers for ambiguous people, And the other thing is that, like, at my house, things tend to be done by the archaeological method.
What is this?
That means that when things fall into their natural layers of accumulation, you know,
Like the laundry?
No, not laundry, but papers. I'm a teacher and I have a lot of papers and books and copies and junk. But I know in my bookcase where, you know, a certain thing is, because I can think, dang, isn't that the one we did about 10 years ago? And I'll know right where it is. And because with the archaeological method, you simply have to dig down far enough to find what you need. So that can be a barrier. And one more thing, it's the historical meaning of objects. I have many tchotchke kind of objects that I've gotten as little gifts and so on, and I just haven't gotten rid of because they hold a memory of some kind of past thing that was very happy, like a souvenir from a trip. Those are really deadly, really hard to get rid of. And gifts from students or gifts that people give you, and you think, gosh, I better hold on to this and bring it out when they come over. And you know,
You're incredibly organized.
Anyway, so I do think there are a lot of kind of psychological barriers, but they have some value in terms of you have a way of being organized that's different.
Right. Thank you. Okay, 2 comments on that. One on your first point about ambiguity. Ambiguity doesn't mean something is wrong, you know, as you're saying. It just means you could just not be sure about something. You can be ambiguous because, you know what? You just might be so creative, someone might think of 2 options and you think of 8. And so now you're even more ambiguous than you were before. But that's okay. What we're talking about here is getting to what's important. You know, if something's important and not being dealt with, that's one thing. And then the second thing you talked about, I love, is the memorabilia or the things, or maybe a card that a kid gave you in 2nd grade. It just doesn't matter. My personal feeling about this is, who cares? Keep them. If they make you happy when you open up that envelope or you look at that little trinket from Eugene, Oregon, who cares? Keep it. You know, as long as it's not preventing you from walking across your living room, I mean, put these things in a little treasure box. Have a cute little treasure box. It really bothers me, particularly with older people, when their kids come in and they're downsizing and they say, "Oh, get rid of that, Mom. Oh, get rid of that." You know, but this really means something to Mom. It's like taking a piece of her heart and throwing it in the garbage can. Why? Who cares? Let her have her treasure box of mementos. Just have to put my 2 cents worth in here on how I feel about this, because it's no damage to anyone. Now, on the other hand, if you can't walk through someone's house because they're so cluttered, that's something else.